The encounter. The draconian hegemony had ruled the outer spiral for 8,000 years. Their ships were monuments to perfection. Crystalline hulls that bent light itself, weapons that could crack moons, and shields that had never been breached. They were the apex predators of space, and they knew it. Admiral Nexus Korath stood in the command chamber of the hegemony flagship Eternal Dominance, his 4 arms folded behind his back as he studied the tactical display. Before him floated a holographic representation of the Rigel system, where dozens of small primitive vessels had been detected mining asteroids and establishing what looked like permanent installations. "Unauthorized colonization," muttered Commander Zek Valorian, his scales rippling with disgust. "These mammals didn't even request permission to breathe our air." Korath's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his species. In 8 millennia, the hegemony had encountered over 200 species. Every single one had either submitted immediately upon seeing their fleet or been reduced to cosmic dust within hours. These humans would be no different. "Open a channel," Korath commanded. "Let's see how quickly they grovel." The transmission connected, and a human face appeared on the screen. She was young by human standards, with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to sparkle with some private joke. Most remarkably, she was drinking something from a ceramic mug while sitting in what appeared to be a command chair made from salvaged metal and cushioned with what looked like old ship padding. "Well, hello there," the human said cheerfully. "I'm Captain Sarah Martins, but everyone calls me Ghost. You folks seem upset about something." Korath's frills extended in a display of imperial authority. "I am Admiral Nexus Korath of the Draconian Hegemony. You have violated our sovereign space. Submit for judgment or face annihilation." Ghost blinked once, then took a sip from her mug. "Ha, that's interesting. See, according to our star charts, this system has been unclaimed for about 300 years. Did you guys forget to put up a sign or something?" The audacity was staggering. Korath's claws extended involuntarily. "You dare mock the hegemony? Our claim extends to all systems within 50 light-years of our borders." 50 light-years, Ghost whistled. "That's ambitious. How exactly do you patrol an area that big?" "Must keep you busy." Commander Valorian leaned forward, his voice dripping with contempt. "Primitive, your vessels are outnumbered 40-1. Our weapons can vaporize your entire fleet in minutes. Surrender now, and we might allow some of you to live as servants." Ghost's expression shifted, and for a moment, Korath thought he saw something predatory flicker in her eyes. Then she grinned. 40-1. "Oh, you sweet summer children. You really have no idea what you're dealing with, do you?" "Enlighten us," Korath said coldly. Ghost leaned back in her chair. "See, where we come from, 40-1 are pretty good odds. We've survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, world wars, plagues, asteroid impacts, and our own stupidity for hundreds of thousands of years. Our planet tried to kill us every single day, and we said, 'Thank you, may we have another.' So when you show up with your shiny ships and your fancy technology, threatening us..." She paused to take another sip. "Well, it just makes us laugh." The transmission cut. Korath stared at the blank screen for several seconds. Never, in 8,000 years of conquest, had anyone laughed at the hegemony fleet. "Destroy them," he said quietly. What happened next would be debated in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The human ships were ugly. There was no other word for it. Where hegemony vessels were elegant crystalline works of art, human ships looked like someone had welded scrap metal together in a junkyard. They had mismatched armor plating, weapons bolted on at random angles, and engine configurations that violated several laws of physics. But they were fast. The moment the hegemony fleet opened fire, the human ships scattered like startled fish. Their movement patterns made no sense. Random acceleration vectors, impossible turns, trajectories that seemed to defy their own momentum. Hegemony targeting systems, calibrated for rational military maneuvers, couldn't get a lock. "What are they doing?" Valorian shouted as another volley of plasma beams missed their targets entirely. "They're not following proper combat protocols," the tactical officer reported, confusion evident in his voice. "Their formations are chaotic, their attack patterns are random, and they keep laughing." It was true. Human voices filled the communication channels, whooping and cheering like they were at some sort of sporting event rather than fighting for their lives. "Yahoo! Did you see that shot go wide? Nice try. Lizard breath. Ghost, we've got 3 of them trying to flank us on the port side. Copy that. Wildcard. Let's show them why they call us the asteroid runners." The human ship that had been identified as Ghost's command vessel suddenly performed what could only be described as a barrel roll between 2 hegemony cruisers, firing kinetic rounds that punched through their shields like paper. The rounds weren't sophisticated, just chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds, but they were devastatingly effective. "Impossible," Korath roared. "Their weapons are primitive. How are they penetrating our defenses?" The answer came from an unexpected source. While the hegemony had focused on energy weapons and exotic particles, humans had perfected the art of throwing rocks very, very hard. Their rail guns and mass drivers were crude by galactic standards, but they hit with the force of meteors. More troubling was their tactics, where every other species fought according to established military doctrine. Humans fought like they were insane. They used their own ships as decoys, performed kamikaze runs that turned into elaborate feints at the last second, and seemed to anticipate hegemony movements before they were even made. "Sir," the sensor officer's voice cracked with panic, "they're not just random. They're learning our patterns and adapting in real time." It was true. What had seemed like chaos was actually a form of warfare the hegemony had never encountered. Humans didn't just adapt to their enemies' tactics. They incorporated them, modified them, and threw them back with interest. Captain Sarah "Ghost" Martinez sat in her command chair, her earlier humor replaced by razor-sharp focus. Around her, the bridge of the Lucky Strike hummed with activity as her crew worked with practiced efficiency. "Status report," she called out. 6 hegemony vessels disabled, 3 destroyed, reported her tactical officer, a grizzled veteran named Torres. "They're trying to regroup, but they keep broadcasting their intentions on open channels." Ghost nodded. Hegemony military doctrine was apparently based on overwhelming force and rigid hierarchy. They announced their maneuvers, confirmed orders, and followed predictable patterns. It was like fighting an enemy who telegraphed every punch. "What's our casualty count?" "Minor hull damage on the Scrappy, and Johnson's ship lost a sensor array." "That's it." Ghost allowed herself a small smile. "All right, people. Time to show them what happens when you threaten human colonies. Initiate Operation Porcupine." What the hegemony saw next defied all logic. The human ships, which had been fighting individually, suddenly coordinated in perfect harmony. But instead of forming traditional battle lines, they created a 3-dimensional web of crossfire that turned space itself into a killing field. Ships that had appeared damaged suddenly revealed themselves to be perfectly functional, hitting hegemony vessels from unexpected angles. What had looked like retreating maneuvers turned out to be elaborate positioning for devastating attacks. The humans had been toying with them. Admiral Korath watched in growing horror as his seemingly invincible fleet was systematically dismantled by opponents who should have been nothing more than a minor annoyance. His flagship shuddered as kinetic rounds hammered its shields, and for the first time in his military career, he felt something he had never experienced before: fear. "Sir," Valorian's voice was barely controlled panic. "We've lost over half the fleet. Request permission to withdraw." Korath stared at the tactical display, watching red icons blink out one by one. The Eternal Dominance herself was taking heavy damage, her crystalline hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere. Around them, the remnants of the once mighty hegemony fleet limped through space, their elegant forms marred by the brutal efficiency of human warfare. The communication channel crackled to life, and Ghost's face appeared on the screen again. She was no longer smiling, and her eyes held the cold calculation of a predator. "Admiral Koreth," she said simply, "you came to our home. You threatened our people. You thought we would be easy prey." She leaned forward. "We are the descendants of apex predators from a death world. We didn't climb to the top of our food chain by being nice. We did it by being meaner, tougher, and more stubborn than anything that wanted to eat us." Korath found his voice. What do you want?" Ghost's smile returned, but it was not a pleasant expression. "We want you to go home. We want you to tell everyone you meet exactly what happened here. And we want you to remember that humans don't start fights." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But we sure as hell finish them." The transmission ended, and the surviving hegemony ships found themselves being escorted to the edge of the system by the same vessels that had just humiliated them. As they jumped to hyperspace, Korath realized that everything had changed. The galaxy had a new player, and they fought by rules that no one had ever written. In the depths of space, human laughter echoed across the communication channels, and the draconian hegemony learned their first lesson about the species from Sol 3. Never mistake kindness for weakness, and never, ever threaten their homes. The revelation. The Grand Council chamber of the draconian hegemony had never seen such chaos. Representatives from across their vast empire filled the crystalline amphitheater, their voices creating a cacophony of fear, anger, and disbelief. At the center of it all sat High Counselor Thane Omnicus, his ancient form radiating the authority of millennia. The holographic display showed the aftermath of what military historians were already calling the Rigel humiliation. 43 hegemony vessels destroyed or disabled by a ragtag fleet of human ships. The casualty reports made for grim reading. "This is impossible," declared Counselor Vex Nexera, her crystalline carapace reflecting the chamber's light in agitated patterns. "Humans are a primitive species. They've barely achieved faster than light travel. How could they defeat our finest fleet?" Admiral Koreth, his once proud bearing now hunched with shame, stood before the council. His report had been thorough, clinical, and devastating. "They don't fight like anyone we've ever encountered," he said quietly. "Every tactical manual, every strategic doctrine, every assumption we have about warfare, they ignore all of it." High Counselor Omnicus raised one massive hand for silence. The chamber fell quiet with the respect born of millennia of absolute authority. "Explain their methods." Korath activated his tactical display, showing the battle from multiple angles. "They use chaos as a weapon. Instead of maintaining formation, they scatter randomly. Instead of following predictable attack patterns, they improvise constantly. They use their own weaknesses as strengths, turning damaged ships into weapons, using inferior technology to defeat superior systems." "Madness," muttered Counselor Drex Valorian. "No civilized species fights this way." "That's just it," Korath replied. "They're not civilized by our standards. They're survivors." The discussion was interrupted by an aide who rushed into the chamber, his movements radiating panic. "High Counselor, there's a human ship approaching the capital." The chamber erupted in chaos again. Omnicus stood, his 12-foot frame towering over the assembly. "A ship. Singular." "Yes, my lord. One vessel. It's transmitting diplomatic credentials and requesting permission to dock." Through the vast windows of the council chamber, the assembled representatives could see it approaching. The human ship was just as ugly as the reports had suggested. A patchwork of different metals and technologies that looked more like a flying junkyard than a diplomatic vessel. But it moved through the heavily defended space around the hegemony capital with casual confidence, as if the massive defense platforms and patrol fleets were nothing more than decorations. "They dare come here," Vex Nexera hissed. "After humiliating our fleet, grant them docking permission," Omnicus said calmly. "I want to see these humans for myself." An hour later, the human delegation entered the council chamber, and the assembled representatives got their first close look at the species that had shattered their military confidence. There were 3 of them, and they could not have been more different from each other. The leader was a woman of perhaps 50 human years, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything around her with scientific precision. She wore simple civilian clothing and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime solving impossible problems. Beside her stood a mountain of a man who looked like he had been carved from granite. His bearing was unmistakably military, and scars crisscrossed his visible skin like a roadmap of violence survived. Despite his intimidating presence, he seemed relaxed, even amused by the grandeur around him. The third human was the most unsettling. She was young, barely out of adolescence by human standards, but her eyes held an ancient intelligence. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator, and every hegemony representative in the chamber felt their prey instincts activate when she looked at them. "Honorable High Counselor," the older woman said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber despite its conversational tone. "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, xenobiologist and diplomatic representative of the Terran Colonial Council. This is General Marcus Chen, our military advisor, and Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, whom I believe you've already met." Ghost. The pilot who had led the attack on their fleet was little more than a child. The realization sent ripples of unease through the assembly. Omnicus leaned forward in his throne. "You come before us after destroying our ships and killing our people. Explain yourselves." Dr. Vasquez nodded calmly. "We come to prevent further misunderstandings. Admiral Koreth's fleet attacked our civilian mining operations without provocation or warning. We defended ourselves." "Defended?" Counselor Nexera's voice rose to a shriek. "You destroyed half our fleet." "Yes," General Chen spoke for the first time, his voice like grinding stone. "We did, and we could have destroyed all of it." He paused, letting that sink in. "We chose not to." The chamber fell silent. The implication was clear and terrifying. Dr. Vasquez continued smoothly. "We understand that this has been shocking for your civilization. You've built your empire on the assumption that superior technology and overwhelming force are the keys to victory. That works well against most species, but humans are not most species. What makes you so special?" Omnicus asked, though his tone suggested he was beginning to suspect the answer. Sarah Martinez stepped forward, and her youthful appearance made her words all the more chilling. "We're from a death world, sir. Our planet has tried to kill us with ice ages, volcanic eruptions, diseases, predators, meteor impacts, and climate shifts for hundreds of thousands of years. Every generation of humans has had to adapt or die. We're not the strongest species, or the fastest, or the smartest, but we're the most adaptable." General Chen nodded. "Our ancestors survived by being creative, stubborn, and just a little bit crazy. When faced with a saber-toothed tiger, they didn't run. They figured out how to kill it and make tools from its bones. When ice covered half the planet, they didn't migrate. They learned to make fire and hunt mammoths. When diseases wiped out civilizations, the survivors adapted and became stronger." Dr. Vasquez pulled up a holographic display of Earth, showing its violent geological history. "Your species evolved on stable worlds, under predictable conditions. You developed technology to solve problems, which is admirable. But humans developed something else: the ability to turn problems into solutions." "I don't understand," admitted Counselor Drex. Sarah grinned, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the pilot who had laughed at their fleet. "You saw our ships. They're ugly, improvised, built from whatever we could find or salvage. Your ships are beautiful, perfect, designed by committee, and built to specification. But when something goes wrong with one of your ships, you need a repair dock and specialized parts. When something goes wrong with one of our ships, we grab some scrap metal and fix it ourselves. Your tactics rely on overwhelming force and perfect coordination," General Chen added. "Ours rely on chaos and adaptation. You fight the way you think fighting should be done. We fight to win, using whatever works." The uncomfortable truth was beginning to dawn on the assembled counselors. High Counselor Omnicus voiced what they were all thinking. You're saying that your apparent disadvantages are actually strengths. Exactly, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. You have better technology, larger ships, more advanced weapons, but we have something you don't. Experience with losing. Every human alive is descended from ancestors who faced impossible odds and survived. We're not afraid of being outnumbered, outgunned, or out-technologized. We're used to it. Counselor Nexera's voice was barely a whisper. What do you want from us? Sarah Martinez answered, her voice carrying the casual confidence that had so unnerved Admiral Korath. Nothing, really. We just want to be left alone to mine our asteroids and build our colonies. But we also want to make sure that everyone understands what happens if you don't leave us alone. General Chen's smile was not entirely pleasant. See, the thing about humans is that we hold grudges. Admiral Korath attacked our civilians. That made us angry. Angry humans are very, very dangerous humans. But we're also reasonable, Dr. Vasquez interjected diplomatically. We don't want war. War is expensive, destructive, and wastes resources that could be better used elsewhere. We'd much rather trade, share knowledge, and find mutually beneficial solutions to common problems. High Counselor Omnicus was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. Finally, he spoke. What you're describing sounds like controlled madness. That's not wrong, Sarah laughed. But it's our madness, and it works for us. The council session continued for hours, with human representatives patiently explaining their species' approach to everything from warfare to diplomacy to engineering. The picture that emerged was both fascinating and terrifying. Humans weren't inherently aggressive, but they were absolutely ruthless when threatened. They preferred cooperation, but they were perfectly willing to fight entire empires single-handed if necessary. Most unsettling of all was their attitude toward the impossible. Where other species saw insurmountable obstacles, humans saw interesting puzzles. Where others saw certain death, humans saw calculated risks worth taking. As the humans prepared to leave, High Counselor Omnicus made one final attempt to understand them. Dr. Vasquez, in all your species' history, what has been your greatest achievement? The xenobiologist considered the question carefully. That's easy, Counselor. We survived. Everything else is just details. As the human ship departed, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence, Admiral Korath found himself thinking about that simple statement. They survived. Not conquered, not dominated, not achieved supremacy. They simply endured, adapted, and thrived despite every obstacle their universe could throw at them. The draconian hegemony had ruled through fear and superior technology for 8,000 years. But now they faced a species that had spent 100 times that long learning that the universe was hostile, unfair, and absolutely determined to kill them. And humans had looked at that universe and laughed. The galaxy would never be the same.